Welcome to the Back to Basics podcast. I'm Jeff Helfrich, State Representative for House District 52. As a police officer, I got to see what worked on the street and what didn't. You know what? Life is messy. Government's even messier. I want to cut through the bureaucracy and the red tape to make your life easier. So with that said, here's our next episode. You're getting better at it, right? All right, ready? All right. Hey, welcome back to the Back to Basics podcast. I'm Jeff Helfrich, State Representative for House District 52. Life is messy, government's even messier, and I'm here to cut through it. Let's focus on what works. Simplify your world is what's going to make a difference. Today, it's behind the scenes, behind the gavel with Representative Virgle Osborne from District 2 out of Roseburg. He's Roseburg born and a business owner, a guy who's fought for Southern Oregon from the ground up. Let's roll. Virgle, you're a lifelong Douglas County guy, born in Roseburg, raised in Winston. What is one lesson you learned from a small town that still guides you in Salem?
Well, I think the biggest lesson, Jeff, is just never give up, right? We're our town, our folks were hardworking. I mean, when I was in school, I was hauling hay in the summertime and, working in a mechanic shop off the time, and then also playing football. I mean, we lived life and we worked hard, and we never quit. Yeah,
I think a lot of people that I've interviewed from small towns, it has that mentality. It's like nothing's given to you. And, I had another podcast, somebody said, from a small town, I only had 14 kids in my graduating class. And so I couldn't pick my teammates, but we just worked hard and got over some of our differences. So that's.
Absolutely. My parents, I was raised fairly low income. We didn't make much money, and there was 6 of us kids in the house. So my parents are busy, so when it came time to drive, we bought our own cars and we paid for our own insurance, and we worked for that.
Yeah, very good. So you've run Twin Peaks off-road since '95. You worked in lumber, you've worked in auto parts, adhesive sales. You did a lot of real hands-on kind of stuff. How did that hustle push you into planning commission and then on into the House in '23?
Well, I think being part of the community, I've been part of the community for my whole life, and I always tried to volunteer when I could to just make things better for folks in the community. And you probably didn't see that on there, but I also have been a search and rescue member for, almost 25 years as well with the Sheriff's Department there in Douglas County. And I think, I decided to get into a little bit more of the politics by getting on the Planning Commission for the county, and then I ended up within about a year I was the chair of the Planning Commission, and so it really just fit well with my agenda and how I felt about life, and I felt like there was an opportunity to do better for representation in Southern Oregon. I just don't think our voices were being heard like they should be, so I stepped up and ran and won.
I want to unpack something you said when you're chair of the Planning Commission. What was an aha moment when you got on the Planning Commission and go like, you know what, this is not right. We have to make things simpler to do stuff.
Well, boy, there was lots of aha moments, but what I learned on the Planning Commission and what I used to tell all of my commissioners before we voted was whatever we decide today is something that is going to affect us and everybody around us for maybe the next 10 years or longer. So, my message to them was we need to vote on things that make sense. And keep in mind the consequences of our vote, because long after we're gone and long after we're not on the Planning Commission, there was going to be those consequences will still be there. So That was probably the biggest learning thing that I got from Planning Commission.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson. So the follow-up kind of that is, what's one way the businesses that you've been in that taught you to simplify government? What's one lesson out of that, being your business side of that, put your business hat on and to simplify government? What's one thing that you're like, we got to simplify this. We got to get back to that basics.
Well, deregulation. I mean, in every business that I've been involved in, whether it be timber or even my own small business that I run now, we have to deregulate. We have to get to the point where unleash our business, and let business happen. Capitalism is a great thing if we just let it happen, but our state just has a tendency to overregulate, and between taxes and pay leave Oregon, I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of reasons why bureaucracies have stepped in. If we could simplify business and get back to just basics, I think our state would just go crazy. We'd be doing really well.
What committee are you on? Because you're a vice chair of a committee, right? And so
Yeah, I'm vice chair of Commerce and Consumer Protection, which is a great committee because we hear a lot of bills that affect business, and well, everything we do affects business for sure.
So in that committee, let's kind of unpack a little bit more on that. The other side of the aisle, your Democratic colleagues, and you got the Republican philosophy and kind of cutting the red tape, and they need to think there's more regulation. What do you see as the biggest difference when you're talking? Because there's a variety of those colleagues, right? I mean, you got a spectrum of Republicans, then you got a spectrum of Democrats. But talk about the farthest left of a Democrat and the one that's more centered. What do you see there? Not, you don't have to name names or anything, but what do you see the different philosophies?
Well, I think the philosophies change with the demographics of where the rep comes from. I mean, when you have representatives that are more urban related, live in Portland, Multnomah County, wherever it may be, their philosophy on business is really to overregulate. There's always a law that can be passed that can make things better. As you get into more rural representation, it's just the opposite. It's like, leave us alone, let us do our job, and don't cloud up don't get in the way with all these things. Unions are obviously in play all the time. I mean, there's even today we had a bill that we heard that involved unions getting in play. And when unions come into small business, it complicates things. And I think you'll see with urban reps, myself included, we tend to just say, hey, get out of our way and let us do our jobs.
Yeah. So in 23, you hit the ground running, pro law enforcement. You talked about your sheriff time, pro timber, obviously, better schools. What's one fight that we did in the House that you're most proud of that made life simpler for your district, for District 2?
Wow. There were a lot of fights. You were there with me.
I know, but what's one that helped you and your district? Because we're talking about you and your district and how you're helping bring a better Oregon to your district.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much that went on in 23, but the bills that really were the fight were the bills, like the abortion bill, the transgender bill, and the gun bills. We didn't win those battles, but we didn't lose them entirely. And let's just go with the gun bills. I mean, I'm a very pro-gun person, and my district is also very pro-gun. The House Bill 2005 had different fingers that really affected your Second Amendment rights. And we stood up to that. And, there was lots of, it was complicated. There was lots of stuff involved in it. But at the end of the day, we did change a lot of what happened. And when that bill went through, even though we couldn't stop it, we modified it and we made things better. Now, unfortunately, we're seeing some of that stuff come back, and they're gonna go back to the well again on us. But I think that's the one that stands out in my mind the most for 2023. But I was also new, so it was a very busy time, and there was just so much going on. But
yeah. All right. So, what's one mess in Salem that you would like to fix this session? I mean, not that they were in the majority, we're in the super minority, I understand those things, but if there's something that you could get everybody to coalesce around and just fix one of these messes that's been created in Salem by this bureaucracy, by all this red tape and all this nonsense that we see going on, because they think our colleagues across the aisle and the unions or whoever it is think the government can make everything better when we know it can't. We got to get government to get out of the way. What's one thing you'd want to see fixed?
Just because it's top of mind right now, because we just heard a bill today that was pro-union labor, basically for ag. I think the one thing we need to do is fix our approach to agriculture in the state. I mean, ag is a huge part of what happens in Oregon. I mean, between our exports and, not just to other countries that we send out, what we grow here, but also to other states. And, we've just continued to make it harder and harder for our farmers to exist. And in fact, we've gotten to the point now where it's difficult to even keep a farm because of all the restrictions and regulations. Now we have the ag overtime bill, which is something that happened, I think it was in 20 or a little bit, it might have been 23, but we need to back away from continuing to beat up our farmers and let them do their jobs, because what's going to happen is if we continue to put the screws to our farmers, we've lost 2,000 farms in 5 years. As we continue to put the screws to our farms, they're going to become corporate farms, or they're just going to become inoperable farms. And if they become corporate farms, that changes everything. And, the hometown labor goes away, right? You end up with big corporations running Oregon. And, that's not the core. That's not our backbone here. That's not what we are. So I think that's probably the one thing I would suggest that we back off, and let's let our farmers do their jobs. They know how to do it. Yeah. And frankly, the legislature does not.
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. All right. So let's go behind the gavel and tell me a story from your life. Maybe it's from your business or your search and rescue or growing up that hit you hard and shapes you now and how you serve today.
Wow.
I know it's a lot to unpack for you, big guy. Yeah, think about that. Do you need a drink of water? You want some of your iced tea?
No.
Can you get that and go in your eye?
Yeah, no, I'll be okay.
All right. I'm trying to take care of my friend here, right?
No. I think a real learning experience I had when I was young. So, when you're, 15, 16 years old and you're just, fresh in high school and you think you're invincible and you do things that you probably shouldn't do. You might, you end up with the wrong crowd and you drink a little bit of beer when you're 16 or 15 and you really shouldn't be doing that. I think, I had that experience just like every teenager does. And unfortunately, I was involved in a car wreck. I wasn't driving, but I was in the car with six of us, and the driver was very intoxicated. We went off the road doing well over 80 miles an hour, and in the middle of the night crashed. One of the folks in the car died, but the rest of us all ended up in the hospital. And I probably had the least of the injuries, and I went through the front windshield at roughly 80 miles an hour. And I'll tell you, it was a real wake-up call for me. Even though I was 15 at the time, almost 16. I turned 16 like within that summer. But I learned a lot in my mind about how it's time to grow up and not do stupid things, because stupid things could cost you your life. And my parents, rather than beat me up really hard about it, they used it as a learning experience. And frankly, I never touched another drop of alcohol until I was 21. So I learned a lot.
Yeah. All right. That's a good life lesson.
Yeah.
You said stupid things, and there's you've heard me say before, you can't fix stupid, right? Got to get back to basics, can't fix stupid. Yeah. And, government right now is all entangled within itself in this bureaucracy, this red tape. Where do you think the government's got to refocus and help folks in your district? And what do you, to live better? What's one thing there that you would say, just for my district, for me being selfish, representing my district too, what's one thing they could do better?
Well, my district's very rural. I literally have Douglas County for the most part is my district, and it's 5,000 square miles. I mean, it's a big. It's mostly forest. The one thing we need to do is we need to get back to focusing on managing our forest. Now, some of that is federal. Not a lot of it is state, but the state can have an effect on what happens with our timber. And frankly, we were the timber capital of the world when I was growing up, and now we don't log much and we don't mill much. But not only would that be good for our communities, it would also be good for the state, be good for wildfire, to actually thin and manage our forest. And if there's one thing I could do with government today, I would take the restrictions off the forest and put the timber companies back to work. Right.
Put them back to work. Yeah.
Yep.
How much would that mean job-wise for your community?
We lost. Well, every mill that we lose, 400 or 500 jobs for the smaller mills, and the bigger ones, could be a couple thousand jobs.
Let me stop you there. What is that? What's a job like that pay?
So those are all living wage jobs. They all, they're all, most of them are actually, at least with some of the larger mills, were union jobs. So they're paying, $30 an hour, 27 to $30 an hour, probably, I would say on average, which is decent money for that, especially for rural Oregon. Those jobs have just gone away, sadly. And we just haven't pursued making that better. So that's kind of our problem down there.
Yeah. Because I remember when I went down there for the, was it the Reagan Day dinner? You had me host that?
It was, I think it was, yeah.
That was incredible scenery down there and the views. It was just really good people, and they just salt of the earth, want to get things done and just kind of leave us alone. That's just kind of Southern Oregon. That's kind of Eastern Oregon. It's not like the Portland Metro or Eugene or Salem or our government's got to be fixing everything today. Blah, 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 blah. Government's great. Yeah, we're good for some things, but we got to get out of the way, right? So
we have to, and I think the government has been our biggest problem. In this whole state, to be honest with you. I think the bureaucracies that have been formed over the last 30 years have caused the state's decline. And until we either undo that or somehow it has to change, because we can't keep going this direction. At some point, like a parasite, the host dies.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Virgil, one back to basics takeaway for our listeners, something they can kind of hold on to, what would be the one back to basics thing? If you just like, you know what, I am Speaker of the House today. That's what I want to do, back to basics, so we get something passed. What would be that one thing?
Back to basics for me would be go back to doing business, right? I mean, take the reins off business, put DEQ out to pasture. DEQ doesn't need to. We do plenty of really good things, and stop focusing on green. As much as I realize that there is a need for solar power and wind power and all of the above, there's also room for both. And capitalism will do its job if we allow it to do its job. So my back to basics would be just that. Let capitalism do its job. If people want to drive electric cars, and some of us do, we will drive electric cars.
Somebody that has one, don't you?
That's very true.
Basement, yeah.
That's very true. I happen to be a hybrid guy, right? Mine's electric sometimes and sometimes gas powered. But
you drive a lot of miles, man. I get it, right?
I do. And I think that capitalism is just an amazing thing, and our economy will just bounce back so well if we would just take off the restrictions and let it happen.
Virgil, I want to say thanks. That's let capitalism get back to the basics of capitalism. I appreciate that, and you kept it really real for us. So for the next episode of Back to Basics, I'm going to bring somebody on that's passed over 130 pieces of legislation here in Oregon. And he's kind of a legend, and it's going to be really good to talk with him. So remember, Back to Basics. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it strong. And I'm out.